David 2 Central.
Go ahead, David, too.
Can you show me 1041 and put me out on a detail patrolling for recruits?
10-4, I'll sign you out.
We are back with another episode of Patrolling for Recruits. I am Captain Haglin, and I'm here with two of HPD's K-9 handlers, Officer Rathjen and Officer Rochelle. We are going to talk about Holland's K-9 unit and what it's like to be a K-9 handler here in the city of Holland. So welcome to the episode.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Officer Rathjen, we're going to start with you. How long have you been a K-9 handler, and how long have you been at Holland PD? And then if you can just tell us about your partner.
Yeah, so I've been a canine handler for 6 years. I've been with the PD for 10. My first dog was Flynn. He was a German Shepherd. He retired about a year ago. And now I'm working with West, and he is a Malinois.
Thank you. Officer Rochelle, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your partner's name?
Yeah, so I started as a cadet 22 years ago. I've been on the road for 17, and 7 years ago, I got my dog. My first dog, only dog so far, is K-9 Emil. He is an 8-year-old Belgian Malinois German Shepherd cross.
And so when you guys were coming up through the ranks at the Holland Department of Public Safety, did you know coming into law enforcement that you wanted to be a K-9 handler? And if you didn't, when did that shift occur to allow you to become a K-9 handler?
Yeah, so coming in for me, my dad was a police officer, and he had friends who were in the K-9 unit. So it was always something that was on my radar. Once I got to the department, I kind of saw what they did. It really started to get me excited, and I started to look into it more. And that's kind of what changed it, and I started talking to people and figuring out what the unit here at Holland was like.
Yeah, and I grew up always loving dogs and wanting to work with dogs. Always wanted to be a police officer. And then when I started here as a cadet, did a lot of training with the unit at the time. And then as I grew as an officer, decided that was really something I wanted to pursue when the opportunity was available.
Again, we're here with Officer Rathjen and Officer Rochelle. So you both talk about, wanting to pursue being a K-9 handler, and you both obviously did that. We're talking to recruits here who are interested in possibly becoming a K-9 handler. What are some of the things that you two did to separate yourselves from some of the other candidates?
Yeah, so for me, it's just showing what you can do on the road as a police officer first. That's kind of where it starts. And then also just expressing that interest, starting to talk to the people on the unit. I'm going to trainings, trying to be available for what they need, just so that you can start learning prior to what it entails to be a K-9 officer, and then try and figure out how you can hone your skills to make sure that when that opportunity comes available that you can do it.
Yeah, much the same. It is, it's kind of like the secondary aspect of our job. We're a police officer first. So to focus on that part of your career, developing good habits, good investigation skills, good decision making. When you're finally given a dog, it's a very high liability tool. It takes a lot of work to keep it trained and keep it controlled. So if you've developed over the course of your time good use of force decisions and just good patrol decisions, that will go towards making a better canine handler, because in stressful situations, if you've developed good decision making in the past, that's something that we'll look for to fill open positions.
So you both mentioned trainings. I'm going to ask you, for the recruits that are listening, maybe one of you describe a typical training day, and then the other describe how someone can get involved in your trainings.
Yeah, so I can take the training day. Typically, we have 2 trainings a month, so they'll be on our Wednesday that we work. We'll train for 12 hours. Typically, we'll come in, we'll do some sort of a workout to try and keep that up. And then those days can change based on what the dogs need. So we'll put in there, aggression work, tracking, odor. It kind of depends on what that dog needs. If we're seeing something on the road that needs some adjustment, we can be very flexible in those days. So they can alter, but it's 12 hours worth of training that we can have specifically for each individual dog.
And for the recruit that wants to get involved and let's say a training day with Holland Police Department K-9 unit, what does that entail? How do they get involved?
Yeah, so making yourself available would be the first thing. Approaching the unit, if you are in like a cadet or internship role, express interest in even starting with a ride along. But for a training day, we can always use not necessarily a decoy to get bit in the suit or in the sleeve, just because that takes some training and we don't want to do any improper training on the dog with someone that's not experienced yet. But to lay tracks, to hide dope and hide articles, it's really great to have someone with like minimal experience hiding drugs to say, hey, here's 3 units of narcotics or explosives, hide them in these 4 rooms. Because as a canine handler, we know kind of where a difficult spot or a spot would be. But when someone without that experience does it, it's usually like really challenging because they just think different, which is good because that's going to be closer to a real life deployment.
Thank you for that. And once again, here with Officer Rochelle and Officer Rathjen, K-9 handlers for the Holland Department of Public Safety. And just thinking about your typical day as a K-9 handler, what is the best part of your job?
So I think a typical day for us is, I mean, we both work the road, so we do all the road patrol things as well. But the best thing for me is when I get to utilize my dog and go to a call that we can deploy and use some of the training that we have to help out with whatever situation that it is.
Yeah, I mean, deployments are great. In the meantime, just having a dog to go take a walk between calls, to play fetch with him, to keep him exercised, again, between calls, is just fun, and a way to kind of regulate some stress of the job is just to go out and play with a dog for 10 minutes in between some of the stuff we deal with is, I think, the biggest benefit.
Well, let's dive into that just a little bit. So you talked about your favorite calls to go on. Can you give the listeners a favorite call or maybe a summary of your favorite call that you've ever did with your partner?
Yeah, so I think, thinking back to it, there's a lot of them out there, but I think some of the favorite ones that I've had have been some of the tracking ones. Tracking's very difficult in the canine world. It's just a lot of things can go wrong, and it's very hard. But a lot of the tracks that we have done, finding like missing people and things like that, I mean, those are so rewarding because their family's worried, people are worried. So then when you actually go out and you find them, that's something that's great. So
Yeah, I would say finding like the missing person, whether it's elderly or juvenile, is the most rewarding, clearly. It's also the most fun. Well, it's a serious incident. Just the stress that's on the dog and on the handler is less because you're not necessarily dealing with a threat around every corner. You're just, hey, let's go find this person. That just makes it, typically, we have more success because our stress as a handler is less. Not that we are trying any less hard. We just, the old man in the field is not going to shoot back at us, which is fun. And I'd say anytime just that we get to have the dog out, put his collar on, whether it's for some kind of high-risk deployment or to have him out just on a call as a security, it's fun for the dog and it's fun for us too.
So I should have probably asked this before when we were on the process of becoming a K-9 handler, but going back, once you interview for the position and they say, you're the next K-9 handler, do you just get your dog and boom, you're hitting the streets fighting crime, or is there a process then that you have to go through before you can actually go on the road and make an impact in the community?
Certainly. So in the weeks or months leading up to formally getting your dog, there'll be some additional training we'll do one-on-one or with as the team. And then eventually, depending on how the dogs are selected, they'll go to a school, which is, for us, it's a 4-week school, and it's up in northern Michigan. And then you spend your full, I mean, it's more than 40 hours because you're living with a dog. It's in your hotel room with you. And that's where you start to learn not just the dog itself, but how to be a handler, tracking all the things that the dog needs to do and you need to do for patrol. At the end of that, there is a certification to pass for the breeder that we work through, but then when you come back, it's still kind of additional training. And it's up to you as a handler when you're going to deploy your dog from there, as far as when you think he's ready to try a track, to try a sniff, just because you never know and you don't want to do things to get him confused, undo all the work you did at the dog school by coming and doing some kind of live deployment that he's not ready for.
And just to piggyback off of Officer Rochelle's answer to that question, how often do you have to qualify with your dog? Is it just that one time, or how does that work?
So we do certifications every year. So we'll either do a regional or a national certification every year with IPWATA. So that's something that we require as a unit.
IPWATA, what's IPWATA?
International Police Working Dog Association.
So that's who certifies you.
Yep, so then they have master trainers, and they have qualifications for working dogs, whether that's narcotics, explosives, dual purpose, single purpose, meaning aggression, tracking, stuff like that. So they have certifications for all of those different requirements.
So I heard you both talk about liability. Obviously, you have a liability as a police officer in the decisions that you make, but then you also have additional liability with your partner. So how do you help reduce that liability when you're out working in the community?
It starts with training, and that's not just training on duty, it's training at home, maintaining control. That's basically what the Supreme Court says is it comes down to control. So that's what we work towards is enough obedience that they listen to us, not so much that they're just a robot, but we utilize long lines and leashes just because stuff happens. But it's our responsibility as handlers for that dog, and when they get let off the leash or when they get sent somewhere, no matter what a supervisor says, it actually comes down to us deciding when we're going to either let the dog go or use the dog. And that's a big responsibility, which is kind of why, as a department, most agencies will want some kind of length requirement as an officer, so they're not 6 months out of the academy and then you hand them a dog and they don't have a lot of decision making. That's a big part of it.
I have a question for you, Officer Rathjen, just piggybacking off of what Officer Rochelle said. As a member of the recruiting team, a lot of times, and I don't want your egos to get bigger, but everybody that I recruit wants to be a K-9 handler. When I ask them, why do you want to get into law enforcement? It's, I want to be a K-9 handler. I want to be a K-9 handler. Can you tell a potential recruit that's interested in Holland how long, and if you don't know the answer to this, maybe Officer Rochelle does, but how long do you have to be a police officer at Holland before you can become a K-9 handler?
Our requirement's 3 years. You gotta have 3 years of police experience. So that's the minimum that we have, and then once you have that, then you can apply when an open spot is available.
Thank you. Once again, here with Officer Rathjen and Officer Rochelle, K-9 handlers for HPD. What would you guys tell a potential recruit? What advice would you give them if someone's in the police academy right now? Their goal is to one day wear the same uniform that you're wearing as a K-9 handler. What would you tell them if you could go back to do to make them the best available candidate?
Yeah, so again, I think it circles back to just proving yourself on the road and what you do out there in your decision making. But then also, if this is what you want to do, staying committed to it, it is very difficult to get into. But once you have that opportunity, it's one of the best jobs in the world. So I would say just stay committed to what you want, and if that's your goal, make it known and figure out different ways that you can kind of make it happen, I guess.
Yeah, keep it mission focused if that's what you want. And I would recommend then getting into dog training, whether that's a pet or your parents' dog or your sister's dog. Like, try to train with it. We call them green dogs from our vendor, but just because they're imprinted doesn't mean they're trained. My dog didn't know how to sit when I got him. He knew how to sit when he had drugs, but not to sit when you told him. So you're going to have to go through that process. You're going to have to learn how to problem solve. The more experience you have in dealing with as many different leashes as you can, the easier that's going to be when you get your own dog and learn how to deal with them, how to read their body language and your body language.
So I would imagine when you're training at K-9, you go through different spells of learning new things. My next question is, what is the biggest difference between being a K-9 handler now than it was when you first started?
Yeah, so for me, when I first started, I had a narcotics dog, and now my second dog is all an explosives dog. And that's a huge difference in the way that we go about searching. Obviously, it's a big difference between finding narcotics versus finding a firearm or explosives. So I had to situate like my entire thinking on how I would search cars or buildings, and kind of take more precautions and stuff like that. So that's been a huge change in the 6 years for me.
And I think for me, some of the legal and procedural issues that we've gone through the last 5 or 6 years of just changing the way we handle less serious complaints, where we don't necessarily go and use the same level of force we used to. So we don't have as many deployments that we did when we started, but there's still work to be found. It's still the greatest job in the world by far. And yeah, it just, you learn that you can solve problems a different way that we used to use the dog for. We'll just find a different way around it.
I've seen you guys obviously come through as officers into K-9 handlers, and I know that both of you are huge on family. And how, I guess, explain to some of the younger recruits, how does having a police K-9 impact your family? And I guess just describe that, because I feel like that's another aspect that we've almost been here for 20 minutes and we haven't talked about that, but you're taking the K-9 home, you're working with the K-9 at home, and both of you have kids and wives, and how does that work? How does that dynamic work?
Yeah, so, I mean, your family has to be in it with you. So obviously, as a recruit, if you're coming in with a spouse or children, things like that, this is not just a one-person thing. So your wife or your husband or whoever it may be needs to be in that with you. I mean, when I leave, if I don't take the dog, like today, I'm training, that dog stays at home. So my wife's got to let him out, my wife's got to feed him, my wife's got to do all those things. And then you also got to have this dog around your family and around your kids and everything like that. So it's got to be a family ordeal. I mean, this puts a lot of pressure and additional work on your family as well, not just you. So as you're thinking about these things, I would definitely recommend that you talk to your family and make sure that they also are interested in this position as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. These working dogs aren't pets. They're part of our pack, part of our family, but they're working dogs for a reason. They don't have the same off switch that a lot of our pet dogs do, and for that reason, they make terrible pets. So mine doesn't go in the house. It's not that he can't. He just doesn't have an off switch. To him, he's either looking for something to sniff or something to bite. He doesn't get that if it's his house or any other house. So he stays outside in the garage, inside, outside, and we do a lot of playing and training there, but he stays outside. And that's just, it's easier for my family. And then at the same time, he has a quiet space where he can unwind and bark at things. But my kids love him. They play with him. Their friends play with him. Again, that's only under my supervision. I'm still responsible for him. So if they want to say, hey, can we go play fetch or can we play tug with them? Absolutely, but I'm out there with them, and they enjoy it, and they like showing them off to their friends. But it's also something, I think, like Officer Rathjen said, when we go on vacation, we can't just have anybody come let our dog out. It has to be either another handler or a specific place. Because there's a lot of money invested in them, so we need to have someone responsible. But then also, yeah, we don't want something bad to happen either if the dog is confused or stressed with somebody new showing up. So there's a lot to it. You can't just pack up and leave for the weekend like you could with your lab and drop him off at your parents' house. And you need a good environment for him. So usually that means a house or some type of a building that they can have their own space. So that's something to think about too. If you want to be a handler, you need a place to keep them.
All right, so Officer Rochelle, you spoke about how your K-9 is out in the garage, stays outside, and I'm just wondering, does that negate you from having any other pets in the house?
So it does not. I've had 2 Labradors, one passed, and we have a puppy now. They get along fine. He understands the order in the pack. I am careful when they're out that they have a good relationship. They both like to chase balls, so there's no conflict there. It would be a thing, I guess, if we did have a personal pet that it didn't work out, that would be a decision as far as either getting a dog or once you have a dog assigned to you and you say it doesn't work with your home pet, that'd be a tough decision for your family as far as if you're going to stick with the position or the pet. And it may mean in some houses getting rid of the pet or just making sure they're separate all the time, which is feasible in most environments. And I haven't heard of too many people having to do that, but it's not that uncommon if a working dog is so against other smaller animals per se.
And then you guys talked about here at Holland you get to take your dogs home, and I know that you guys also have take-home cars. Is that specific to Holland? Are all agencies like that? Can you just explain to the listeners how that works?
Yeah, so each agency is different. We are very lucky that we get to have those take-home cars and get to bring the dogs home. There are some agencies that the dogs will stay at the department in kennels, and it's taken care of by staff there. And then there's departments that they don't get a take-home car, so they got to figure out how to get this dog into their personal car or how to set that up so they can bring them home. So each agency differs a little bit in that.
Thank you very much. And then lastly, I just want to talk about your annual K-9 golf outing that's coming up. If you guys just want to explain to the listeners what that is all about and when that's going to happen.
Yeah, so that's our annual, it's a fundraising event that we do. We are supported by the city, but we also have additional training and equipment needs. So we've been doing a golf outing for a long time to raise additional funds for that. And that's the last Friday in June every year. And we can always use sponsors or raffle items that we use for our raffle that we do to help promote our unit. It's always a fun day.
And if somebody wanted to get involved or help donate or wanted to, get involved in the K-9 golf outing, who do they contact?
Yeah, so probably the best person to contact would be Joel Reiming. He's going to be the one that can kind of answer questions and figure out where they can get involved. But yeah, we're always looking for volunteers and stuff like that to help out on that day. So,
And if you want to get a hold of Officer Reimink, you can call 616-355-1100 and ask for Officer Reimink, and he will help you and answer any questions that you may have. Well, thanks a lot, guys, for being here, being a part of Patrolling for Recruits, and we will be 1042.